Planting a garden in the spring can be a very enjoyable and a very rewarding activity. To make sure that you get the best garden that you can grow with the least amount of insect and disease problems, the planting should begin in the fall, at the end of this year's growing season. Preparing your gardens for the fall begins with a key step, harvesting the remaining vegetables from the garden. When we start to get closer to our first frost, we need to start our fall preparations by harvesting all the rest of our vegetables that are still in the garden. Our first frost typically occurs around October 2nd in Lincoln, Nebraska. If any of your vegetables are close to harvest at this time, you should remove them all before the first frost occurs to still be able to enjoy them. If you go to harvest your tomatoes and there are still a lot of green tomatoes on the vine and frost is forecasted to occur that night, you can pick the green ones and wrap them in newspaper and place them in a cool, dark environment like a basement. You should be sure to only put one layer of tomatoes in each box and allow them to ripen in the newspaper. Check them periodically to determine when they are ripe enough for you to eat fresh or when they are ready to be canned for later use. Pumpkins can stay on the vine until the first hard frost, which occurs around October 24th in Lincoln. They will be fine after the first hard frost, but need to be harvested within the next day or two to avoid damage to the pumpkins. Onions can be dried out and hung in the basement or a cool, dry location to be used throughout the winter. As for the other vegetables in the garden, they either need to be eaten before they rot or they need to be canned for use throughout the winter months. The second step in preparing our gardens for the fall is to remove the vegetable plants and the debris from the garden. After we have finished harvesting all of our produce, we should clean up all of the debris from the plants as well as pull out all the plants. If we leave those leaves and stems in the garden over the winter, it would be a great place for diseases and insects to overwinter. You should pull all these dead plant parts out of the garden even if you didn't see any diseases in the garden this year. These materials should be composted or put into your local trash pickup. Don't forget that you need to rotate your crops every 2 to 3 years so you won't plant the same crops in the same location of your garden every year. It would be wise to make a note of where each crop was planted this year before you remove them all this fall to ensure the rotation next year. The third step to preparing your garden for the fall is to till up the garden area. The reason that we would want to till our gardens in the fall is to make it easier to prepare the garden the following spring. If it was already tilled up in the fall, the spring garden preparations would be much easier when the time comes. Tilling our gardens in the fall also allows us to move into our fourth step of fall preparation, adding nutrients and organic matter to the soil. Adding nutrients and organic matter should be done in the fall and in the spring to ensure that you have very fertile ground for maximum production of your fruits and vegetables the next growing season. If you would like to add manure to your soil, fall is the time when you need to do it. According to the standard of good agricultural practices, raw manure can be added to the soil 120 days prior to harvest or longer. We don't want to put raw manure in with our plants that we may be eating raw, so adding the manure in the fall ensures a safe harvest and gives our soil the nutrients and organic matter that it needs to produce a great crop the next year. If your soil is low on any nutrient, such as phosphate or potash, the fall is a great time to add those too, because they need to be tilled into the soil. Be sure to incorporate the nutrients and organic matter into the soil. You don't want to just pour the manure or other fertilizers on top of the soil. You want to incorporate it into the soil by using a tiller. If you do not have a tiller and don't want to pay to rent one, you can add nutrients and manure to the soil with the use of the rake, if the soil is loose enough. If you have already tilled up your garden, incorporating the manure and organic matter into the soil with a rake would be much easier. The fifth and final step to preparing your garden for the fall is to add mulch to the soil surface. The mulch added can either be wood chips or grass clippings. The grass clippings may be a better choice for the fall because they will stay in place better and they will add a lot of organic matter into the soil for the next growing season. The grass clippings are also more beneficial than the wood chips because they can just be incorporated into the soil in the spring rather than having to rake up all the wood chips prior to spring garden preparation. Be sure to keep the mulch layer fairly thin, only about 1 to 2 inches deep. The reason that we add mulch to a garden when we prepare it in the fall is to reduce the amount of erosion and wind-blown particles that would take our good topsoil off of our garden and place it somewhere unwanted. Have fun while you're prepping your garden this fall because you'll be able to just dig in next spring. I'm Nicole Haxton with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Extension.